Hey everybody, Brian Hunt here with you for another video. In this video, I'm talking about retainer clients and how I used retainer clients to move to being a full-time freelance video producer slash filmmaker. So we're gonna have to go back in time to the early 2000s. It was 2002, 2003 maybe, I think 2002, I had just finished a postgraduate diploma in post-production, film and television post-production. And this was when SARS was just hitting Toronto. So SARS was like a pandemic, but didn't really become out as a pandemic. It was worried to become a pandemic. I think somewhat like the COVID thing, but didn't get as bad. But it still wreaked havoc on the film industry in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and in different parts of the world it did as well, but it did very much so in Toronto, Canada. So I had some issues getting some contracts and jobs right out of school because a lot of places were closing down. I was able to be doing some freelance work, but I also had to take some longer contracts on things. So for a few years, I was working contracts, 6-month contracts at places. Sometimes I was working month-to-month contracts at places. I did also get hired later on after I was married on a full-time job, and I had that for a few years. That was a very secure kind of government internal job doing video production. And at the time, I was working like crazy. I was a young father. I had a 1.5-year-old. We had another baby on the way. And I was also working freelance on the side, or any of the holidays I had. I was taking that time off from my full-time job doing video work to do other video work. So I was working around the clock, building up clients, building up my kind of network. And I got to the point doing some work where I needed to make a change. I needed to do and go out on my own and be able to do work that way. But I was very scared to do that in the beginning because I had bills to pay. I had a mortgage. I had a young child, and I had another one on the way, and my wife, I needed to support everybody. She wasn't able to work at the time, or she was working in between, but in between different mat leaves. So a good friend of mine that was at a company that I was doing work with suggested this to me about the retainer idea. If you don't know what retainers are when you're working with this with a client, is basically you're setting out a certain contract. I was doing year-long retainers, and they would pay me out a same amount every month for that 12 months, and I would be doing a certain amount of work during that time. And sometimes it might be more work than other months. And in some months, I wasn't doing any work, but they were breaking up my payments and my money coming in over 12 months. Now, this was beneficial to them and to me, because for one, I was able to break up and have money coming in monthly, which is one of the hardest things as a freelancer, is knowing when you're going to get paid and balancing that out to cover your bills. And also for them, I was giving them a bit more. We had figured out from years past how much work I was doing and maybe how much more extra work I could do. And for them, it was easier for them to budget it this way as well. They knew exactly what it's going to cost and how much work I was going to get from that. So we had a contract that said, this is what I'd be delivering. This would be how many days of shooting I'd be doing. This is how many kind of finished videos I'd be getting for this amount. And we're breaking it up over this time. And for them, the majority of time I'd be shooting was actually in the summer months, and then a bunch of editing into the fall. There was very little or no time doing work in the winter months. Now, I had this one client, and then I had some other clients I was doing ongoing work with, and I approached them about doing the same kind of thing. And I actually got 3 clients to agree to doing a 12-month retainer with me. And all those retainers actually added up to more than I was getting as a salary at where I was working full-time at the time. So I was able to feel comfortable to leave that full-time position because I knew I had my salary covered. And the big benefit for me was that this was not nearly as much work that I was actually already doing. I think overall, if we took all my things together, it was maybe 12 days of work per month. maybe a bit more depending on the months that we're doing. But then there was the rest of the time, there was another 20 days or so in a month where I was able to do work with other people, or I was able to spend time with my family and actually do things that way, that and have a bit of a life and not just be working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so this was a huge stepping stone for me that allowed me to feel comfortable to go out fully on my own, fully freelance, by having these retainer clients set up. And it allowed me to then have more time to pick up other jobs and do other work. And in that first year, I actually more than doubled my salary that I was getting alone when I was working full time. So it was, people thought, again, I was leaving kind of a government sort of position, and they thought, you know, I was crazy. I was losing my benefits. I was not going to be all these different things within a union as well. But for me, it was very beneficial in that I could now move up and do things and do what I wanted to do. And for what a lot of us want to do as filmmakers, as video makers, as people creating content, we want to be able to do our own stuff, and we want to have that time to be able to do our own stuff. And working for yourself does allow you to do that, but it can be stressful. So retainer clients are a big help for this. I still, from time to time, do take on retainer clients. One of the things I have learned from retainer clients that I would like to share with you guys is when you're negotiating what you're doing, be very clear on some of the things within your contract. Where I ran into trouble sometimes was on how much leeway they were allowed to give me for work. So I had so many days set aside or so many projects set aside per client for the retainers. But what would happen a lot of times would be, giving me 3 days notice and saying they needed to do this big shoot and this big production. And I might have already had a bunch of other stuff booked that was outside on different jobs, not within the retainer work. And this became tricky because I felt obligated that I needed to do the work for them because I was on retainer, and they felt that way too. But I had not stipulated that they need to give me X amount of notice. Another thing would be cancellation days. Just because you're on retainer doesn't mean they can just cancel days on you anytime they want. There should be something with those things. For if they're just canceling days because they're not ready and they booked you for a day, that should come off against the days that you have within your retainer. I did have issues this way as well because all of a sudden they start canceling days and I said no to other jobs, and then I have to find another day to make it work. And then the retainer didn't become as valuable to me. It was becoming a lot more valuable to them. But it needs to be a value proposition for you. It needs to work for you and make sense for you, and also for them. They need to see, why should they put you on retainer, and why shouldn't I just keep paying you out the way that they all have been, or just by job. And one of those ways for them is by you letting them know they're going to get better value for what they're doing. And it's a better and easier way for them to figure out a budget and where those dollars are going to go for what productions. So a client can look at the retainer and they can budget out things and say, okay, I know we have X amount of videos that we are allowed to do with Brian, or X amount of projects we're allowed to do with Brian. What are we going to plan these out? What are these things going to be? And hopefully they're planning stuff out in the future, and you can start to get a schedule going, and you can, one, make better content because you're planning stuff out in advance, and two, you're going to know your schedule going forward. But that's just my 2 cents on retainer clients and how you can use retainer clients to really help you kind of get your cash flow going, keep a consistent cash flow going, and in my case, how you can use retainer clients to feel comfortable to leave your full-time job that you have or the other work that you're doing and just focus on your video and your filmmaking career and push forward that way. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for watching this video. If you like it, please give me a thumbs up. Please think of subscribing to the channel, and we'll see you on the next one.